everyone. Welcome to Unit 6, Market Analysis and Management of Housing. So when we're done with this unit, you should be able to describe the different types of residential properties, distinguish the difference when managing cooperatives, condominiums, and planned unit development, summarize the issues involved when managing subsidized housing, and explain the differences and similarities when managing manufactured home parks and housing for the elderly. All right, let's jump right in. Overview of residential property. Learning objective describe different types of residential properties. Residential rental housing ranges from single-family houses to huge apartment projects of several thousand units and includes mobile home parks, time-sharing resorts, government-assisted housing, institutional housing, apartment hotels, and retirement communities. As the greater portion of residential tenants live in apartment buildings, this unit will emphasize the management of apartment buildings. While specific application of the property management techniques discussed in this unit may have to be modified according to the circumstances, the basic principles here have universal application. Property managers should research and follow the laws and regulations of the jurisdiction where the property is located. Compliance with fair housing laws is of particular concern in residential management. In some parts of the country, rent control laws, laws limiting or prohibiting the construction of new units, and other laws and regulations have been passed that present unique problems, mainly in the areas of financial operation, rent raises, and eviction of tenants. Types of residential property. Different types of dwellings require unique management capabilities. This unit discusses single-family rentals, that is, single-family residences, duplexes, triplexes, and large apartment communities. Multifamily properties, including condominium and cooperatives, low-income and government-subsidized housing, and some manufactured home parks, are discussed in the next unit, specialized housing. Single-family housing. Investing in single-family rental homes has been popular for some time, and many owners have built up large holdings of single-family dwellings. The owners often manage these homes if they live in the city where the homes are located. If not, the owners hire professional managers. It may be unprofitable or impractical for a professional property manager who manages other types of property to manage one single-family home or a few duplexes and triplexes. The principal difference between managing single-family homes and managing apartment buildings centers on geography and time, because single-family rentals are often located in various parts of a city. Properly maintaining and showing property to prospective tenants may involve unproductive travel to and from various locations. Another source of income to these managers is receiving a fee when the property is sold. The manager should consult state law to ascertain whether a real estate license is required to receive this commission if the manager wishes to include the right to a commission in the management contract. Even with the most skillful and well-organized management, the financial return on owning and managing many small homes, duplexes, and triplexes is marginal at best compared to alternate uses of investment funds. If interest rates on mortgages are high, cash flow may be negative. Further, many owners will agree to a below-market rent in exchange for a tenant who will take care of the property and remain in it for a long period of time. Duplexes and triplexes with common areas including front, side, and backyards require harmonious cooperation among occupants. Thus, the tenants must be compatible, a condition not usually as strong a factor when renting in larger communities. Multifamily properties. Multifamily properties are commonly defined as apartment buildings of 5 or more units. There are several classifications of apartments based mainly on the architecture of the project described as follows. Garden apartments. Garden apartment complexes are designed for family living, usually in a sprawling 2-story building or buildings in a project containing predominantly 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom units. They are often located in suburban areas or other regions where land is relatively inexpensive and large tracts are easily obtained. Walk-up buildings. Walk-ups usually are found in urban areas and in older, more concentrated sections of the suburbs. Generally preferred by couples and singles, most walk-ups include 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom apartments. Multi-story elevator buildings. These contain efficiency and 1-bedroom units and are concentrated primarily on the edges of downtown areas of large cities, although they also are found in suburban locations. These are often favored by unmarried people who want to be close to their jobs. High-rise luxury properties. These emphasize view, amenities, and prestigious addresses and are often located either near the central city or in more affluent areas. Units in these buildings may have 1, 2, or 3 bedrooms, but all have relatively larger living areas than units in other types of apartment buildings. Common luxury high-rise tenants are generally higher-income families who seek security in the service and the comforts of a single-family home without the responsibilities of home ownership. Loft conversions. Loft buildings are named because their interior floor space is not specialized. Starting in the 1950s, many large lofts on the fringe of central business districts became vacant as light industries moved to the suburbs. Some loft buildings in prime locations have been successfully converted into condos and apartments, as well as shopping malls, restaurants, and bars. These apartments are attractive to singles, young adults, artists, and older couples who are downsizing. Other alternatives and services. Housing alternatives range from fully furnished units, where everything is supplied for the tenant, to unfurnished apartments equipped only with floors and walls, with the standard unit lying somewhere in between. Large multifamily complexes are referred to as communities. The larger the community, the more likely it offers recreational facilities such as swimming pools, tennis courts, patios, exercise rooms, and recreation rooms. These apartments usually have central air conditioning, the newest appliances, off-street parking areas, and sophisticated security systems. Luxury high-rises may offer doorman, window cleaning services, heated garages, grocery stores, banks, drug stores, and other conveniences located within the building. The walk-up tenant probably receives the least in the way of extra services or facilities. Many walk-ups, garden, and multi-story apartments include only water and trash removal as part of the monthly rent. The tenant is billed separately for all other utility services. Managing tenant relations. The basis of good tenant relations begins with selecting tenants who are able and willing to fulfill their obligations as stated in the lease agreement. By opening the lines of communication with tenants, the manager will build mutually satisfactory landlord-tenant relationships. Many managers recognize that some tenants do not take the time to read the lease carefully, so these managers take the extra time to highlight key clauses, such as when, where, and how rent is to be paid, and the consequences for being late. They may emphasize other conditions such as parking arrangements, how long visitors can stay days, weeks, or months, the need to be respectful of other tenants' rights, noise, and loud music, re-emphasizing penalties for unauthorized pets, and so forth. The house rules should be presented to the prospect very early in the process, hopefully avoiding problems before they are even contemplated. Additionally, the manager should explain that the owner cannot and does not carry insurance on the tenant's personal belongings and that the tenant should obtain renter's insurance. The manager can provide a list of 3 or 4 insurance agents in the area. Also, the manager should carefully explain that the tenant may not make any changes to the carpeting or wall coverings without explicit written permission of the manager and owner. Regular communication. One method of regularly communicating with residents is to publish a brief but informative monthly or semi-monthly newsletter. If major changes are being contemplated, such as extensive renovation, the manager may hold a meeting to explain when these events will occur. Tenant unions. As mentioned earlier, sometimes owners are intent on taking money from the property without providing necessary services. State legislatures have responded with landlord-tenant legislation in many states that allow tenants to form tenant unions. Conflicts can be avoided, however, by implementing a plan that brings management and residents together quickly in a controlled environment for the purpose of joint problem solving. A relatively easy strategy is to establish formal, regularly scheduled meetings with representatives of tenant groups. Once the tenants bring up a problem, they should be confident that management will be responsive, even if the answer is no. A manager should avoid a win-lose atmosphere with potentially destructive emotions so that decisions can be made in a business-like manner. The apartment building staff. In general, the personnel guidelines are fully applicable to the management of apartment projects. Because of round-the-clock involvement, the resident manager in particular occupies a key position in maintaining residential properties and dealing with tenants. The resident manager? The manager of residential property is much closer to tenants' personal lives than the manager of commercial property. Thus, the resident manager must possess versatility with dedication and fairness backed by training, strong selling and communication skills, good business judgment, tact and patience, and a working knowledge of record keeping. Several professional associations offer educational programs designed to develop the skills of a resident manager. Good resident managers are not easy to find. Most often, the property manager will have to rely on referrals from other managers or on classified newspaper ads. In addition, a property manager can become acquainted with prospective resident managers through activity in local apartment associations. Longtime residents are another source of recruits. A prospective manager should be required to fill out an employment application listing education, experience, and references. The ideal candidate should combine experience with a good employment history, a background compatible with that of the tenant population, a stable work record, and a mature approach to the job. Some property managers employ resident managers under a comprehensive contract that clearly specifies the compensation rate, including any apartment concessions, the hours of work, and the duties to be performed. It is standard policy to insert a clause in such contracts setting a dollar limit on expenditures the resident manager may make without the property manager's approval. Other property managers prefer a simpler contract on the grounds that neither party can foresee contingencies. At a minimum, wages and hours should always be in writing. The resident manager must have the respect of the tenants in order to successfully collect rents and deal with problems. The property manager should back up the resident manager whenever possible and cultivate goodwill by indicating that management appreciates her work. The property manager should ask the resident manager's opinion of any changes or improvements to be made on the premises or proposed changes in operating plans. If the resident manager's advice is not followed, a reasonable explanation from the property manager is common courtesy and a gesture of team spirit. Leasing agents. Managers of larger properties have come to recognize the benefits of using a leasing agent specialist. Good leasing agents are often compensated on the number of units rented, so they quickly learn how to present themselves and their properties most effectively. They are experts in learning the prospect's basic needs and desires and how to handle and overcome objections in order to rent the apartment. This area is considered so important that the National Associated Builders and Owners, NABO, offers a certification program for these specialists. Although some leasing agents prefer to stay in this role, others may be considered for assisting the resident manager or to become the resident manager. This is a traditional career path for many resident managers who sometimes move even further up the ladder to the position of property manager. Maintaining the apartment building. The precise duties of all employees involved in maintaining a property depend on the size and facilities of the building, the condition of the premises, and the terms of the management contract. Maintenance duties may be carried out by a large staff that includes a resident manager, janitorial staff, on-site maintenance crew, and various outside service contractors. The resident manager for a smaller property may have to assume maintenance responsibilities with no on-site support whatsoever. Maintenance personnel. The manager's decision to hire full-time or contract services must be based on the amount of services required and the cost effectiveness to the owner. Hiring decisions should be made based on the experience and versatility of the applicant. Many on-site janitorial and maintenance personnel can quickly and adequately perform minor plumbing, electrical repairs, and painting touch-up work at great savings, thus saving the expense of a professional plumber or skilled electrician. Resident manager's responsibilities. The resident manager is one of the most important members on the management team, as this may be the only person the tenant ever meets. As a result, the resident manager must possess a variety of skills, able to manage tenants and maintenance personnel, adept at accounting for money and supplies, and aware of community issues and tenant concerns, all while balancing the owner's wishes with the tenant's demands. The resident manager is usually responsible for supervising all maintenance activities and from time to time being able to execute repairs. The resident manager also supervises housekeeping and maintenance of all common interior areas. Inspection reports can be designed to meet the requirements of the building and should be utilized in order not to forget something and to show continuity. The exterior inspection report form shown illustrates some of the resident manager's typical concerns. Routine tasks should be scheduled on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. High traffic areas require daily attention, as do lawns and swimming pools. Recreation and laundry rooms, parking areas, rubbish cans, and so forth can generally be inspected and cleaned on a semi-weekly or weekly basis. Monthly activities might include fertilizing the lawn, pest control, and inspecting the heating and ventilating plant. Tenants should be encouraged to put their requests in writing. A written request documents the request and limits what will be done when the repair person arrives. All oral or written requests for service should be entered on a 3-copy form or into the computer. The original and a copy which should be left in the apartment on completion of the work, are assigned to the maintenance person answering the request. The third copy is kept by the manager until the job is completed. The resident manager should visit the apartment with the new tenant using the checklist to avoid any misunderstandings as to the condition of the move-in. The resident manager should thoroughly inspect each apartment after tenants vacate the premises. At best, the unit will have to be cleaned before it can be shown to prospective tenants. Property manager's responsibilities. Because the property manager is not usually in daily contact with each building, the resident manager should submit weekly reports on the condition of the property, the work performed, and jobs anticipated for the upcoming week. When coupled with monthly inspection tours, these reports reveal a lot about the resident manager's performance and attitude. Specialized housing. Learning objective. Distinguish the differences when managing cooperatives, condominiums, and planned unit developments, PUDs. Overview of specialized housing. As land and construction costs become more expensive, people are turning to less expensive forms of housing such as cooperative and condominium forms of ownership, planned unit developments, and mobile home parks. Subsidized housing is still a fact of life as housing costs increase faster than wages. Baby boomers are aging and will demand housing that can meet their financial and personal care needs. All of these factors open management opportunities. Cooperatives and condominiums are multiple occupant properties in which the occupants of the premises have a vested interest in the building. Although there are retail, office, and industrial use condominiums, most cooperative and condominium projects are residential properties. Therefore, this unit focuses on residential cooperatives and condominiums and a variation called planned unit developments, PUDs. PUD homeowners own their houses and land but share ownership and responsibility in certain public areas. Management of PUDs is similar to that of condos and co-ops. From a management perspective, these specialized forms of residential management share many characteristics with ordinary multiple occupancy structures, but the form of ownership changes the manager's goals and objectives. Overview of specialized housing. The apartment manager represents the building owner to the tenants of the owner's property, whereas the property manager of a cooperative or condominium works for a group of owner occupants. Management is most concerned with administrative duties and maintenance of the common areas because each owner is responsible for the condition and upkeep of the individual units. Unlike the apartment manager, the manager of a cooperative or condominium usually has no responsibility for maintaining occupancy levels. Resort housing consists of single-family houses, condominiums, or cooperative units. During the high season, the manager markets, approves short-term leases, and arranges cleaning and maid service. During the low season, the manager is concerned with maintenance and security. In multi-tenant properties, the manager must balance the owner's objectives with the overall rules of the community. Subsidized housing projects have unique ownership structures and management requirements. Many of these properties are built in order to gain tax credits for the owners, often anonymous and absentee. These managers must be conversant with many additional local, state, and federal guidelines regarding income verification and tenant qualifying, as well as tax code requirements. Several trade associations offer a designation in tax credit management because on-site compliance is one of the key risks involved with managing tax credit properties. Another area of opportunity involving property management skills is REO sales. The REO is a property that has been repossessed and is now owned by the lender. Many lenders use a listing agreement that basically involves property management functions. Managing cooperatives. Some cooperatives, co-ops, look like apartment buildings, and a cooperative community may look like any other suburban development, but differences in ownership affect responsibilities, liabilities, and maintenance. Co-op ownership is becoming popular with two groups who want the tax advantages of home ownership with the minimum responsibilities of maintenance and repairs, young people just entering the job market and retirees leaving the job market. Structure of cooperative ownership. In cooperative ownership, the apartment owner purchases shares in the corporation or partnership or trust that holds title to the entire apartment building. The ownership of the building can be either trust or corporate in nature. The principal asset of the cooperative is the building. The co-op shareholder receives a proprietary lease granting occupancy of a specific unit in the building. The cooperative owns the building and the shareholder owns the leased personal property. The owner occupies an apartment as a lessee under the terms of the lease but does not own it. Each lessee must pay a pro rata share of the corporation's expenses, which include any mortgage charges, real estate taxes, maintenance, payroll, and such. The owner can deduct a proportionate share of the taxes and interest charges for tax purposes provided 80% of a cooperative's income is derived from tenant-owner rentals. The success or failure of cooperative ownership depends on all lessees paying their pro rata share. Many cooperative associations reserve the right to approve or reject subleases and sales, which can delay transfer of ownership indefinitely. Trust ownership. The legal ownership of the building is placed in the name of a trustee, which may be a trust company. The trustee issues beneficial participation certificates or memberships in the amount of the purchase price of the property, total cost minus mortgage. Trustees of the trust share responsibility for managing the cooperative or hiring a professional property manager to assume these duties. An individual with a membership certificate is granted the right to occupy a unit in the building subject to specific rules and regulations. Corporate ownership. Corporate cooperatives are established as corporations. The corporation then issues stock of a total value equal to the purchase price of the cooperative, again figured by subtracting the amount of the mortgage from the cost of the property. This stock is allocated among the units of the building according to their relative value. Purchasers of stock in the corporation are then granted the right to occupy a unit under a proprietary lease. A board of directors, elected by the shareholders, is in charge of the operation of the property. The board has the right to engage the services of a professional property manager if it so desires. Share proprietary lease. The proprietary lease is inseparable from the share of stock and lasts for the life of the corporation or trust. It is subject to rules and regulations established by the corporate charter and bylaws. Among these rules is the provision that the mortgage debt and the operating expenses for the property are divided among the occupants through monthly assessments. Share allocation. The number of shares allocated to a unit could be equal, or more commonly, they are determined by the size of the unit, its location in the building, and its features. As part of the lease, the charges consist of a monthly assessment for operating costs based on the par value of the shares allocated to the unit plus that unit's proportionate share of the total mortgage debt for the property. For example, in the case of a 20-unit building worth $800,000 and subject to a $400,000 mortgage, the equity base held by the corporation totals $400,000 and could be represented by 4,000 shares of stock worth $100 each. The purchaser of 5% of the stock, or 200 shares, would hold a proprietary lease for a unit valued at $40,000 subject to a mortgage debt of $20,000. If the total monthly mortgage payment for the building was $4,000 in operating costs, including payroll, property taxes, insurance, management fees, utilities, services, supplies, maintenance, and reserve funds, totaled $6,000 per month. The holder of this lease would be assessed $500 per month. $4,000 times 0.05 equals $200. $6,000 times 0.05 equals $300. Covenants. Under a proprietary lease, the interior maintenance of each unit is the responsibility of the lessee, as are all utilities for the apartment except possibly water and sometimes heat. Corporate responsibilities include maintaining structural elements such as in the wall plumbing, electrical and ventilating systems, cleaning exterior and interior public areas, and ensuring efficient services and the smooth operation of the property. The lease should also establish the lessee's liability for negligence and limit the lesser corporation's liability for damage and injury. The rental section provides for some token rental consideration, monthly assessments, and additional rent. Generally, the board of directors is empowered to adjust the monthly assessment as the need arises. Default. If some occupants are unable to meet their monthly assessments, or if they contract for services for which they are unable to pay, the remaining shareholders must bear the extra costs. Otherwise, the trustee or corporation will default on the mortgage, or a mechanic's lien might be filed against the title to the property. Hence, most proprietary leases provide remedies in the event of monthly payment defaults. The ultimate penalty is usually cancellation of the lease and forfeiture of all shares. The corporation would then own the unit and could sell or lease it. Reserve funds and right of first refusal. Generally, a small amount is added to the monthly maintenance charge to maintain a reserve fund. Lessees usually receive an audited operating statement at the end of the year, along with a forecasted operating budget for the next year. The lease also specifies that adequate insurance be carried on the entire property, a necessity for cooperatives. To protect the financial integrity of the cooperative as a whole, most proprietary leases state that the right of possession of the unit may not be transferred without the consent of the board of directors. Others give the corporation the first right to purchase the stock or the certificate and lease of an occupant who wishes to sublet or sell out. The property manager's role. The cooperative property manager's first responsibility is to fulfill corporate aims on behalf of the shareholders. This usually includes maintaining the physical integrity of the property, ensuring ongoing services to the occupants, and submitting regular operating reports to the board of directors. The precise services rendered can range from a periodic consultation to full-time management services on a fixed fee basis. The aims of the corporation and the services expected from the manager should always be spelled out in a detailed written contract. Because the property manager must operate within the economic confines imposed by the board of directors, the manager must have some input when the operating budget for the coming year is drawn up. The manager will find the income and expense analysis condominiums, cooperatives, and PUDs published by IREM a valuable source for comparison with other associations when preparing a budget. The manager must make a realistic calculation of maintenance costs, one that provides for a contingency reserve fund to alleviate future increases in monthly payments. Dealing with numerous resident owners on a day-to-day basis requires a great deal of skill on the part of a manager. Managing cooperatives has its downsides. An inordinate amount of time must be spent attending monthly meetings, communicating with various tenant owners, setting agendas and budgets, and, most difficult of all, refereeing disputes between tenants. Key policy. One note of caution: the cooperative form of organization occasionally has been used for discriminatory purposes. A property manager considering employment by a cooperative should avoid association with any group suspected of discrimination. For more information on discrimination and fair housing laws, see Unit 9. Managing condominiums. Thai condominium has been a revolutionary and rapidly growing form of ownership in U.S. real estate for more than 4 decades. From a successful beginning in Puerto Rico in the 1950s, condominium units have accounted for a notable percentage of all new housing starts because the condominium may often be priced lower than a single-family home. While the new co-op owner receives a proprietary lease, that is, personal property, the new condominium owner receives a deed to real property. Therefore, interest and ad valorem taxes are conveniently tax deductible inasmuch as they are applied directly to each unit, as opposed to co-op ownership, whereby the co-op owner may deduct a proportionate share under certain conditions. Ownership structure. Condominium ownership estates in real property consist of an individual interest in an apartment or commercial unit and an undivided common interest in the common areas in the condo project, such as the land, parking areas, elevators, stairways, and exterior structure. Each condominium unit is a statutory entity that may be mortgaged, taxed, sold, or otherwise transferred in ownership, separately and independently of all other units in the condo project. Units are separately assessed and taxed. While some condominium associations reserve the right of first refusal when a sale is proposed, and many restrict the right to rent out the unit, the individual owner has many more options than when owning a proprietary lease in a cooperative. A condominium development is created by the master deed and the filing of a condominium map or condominium plan. Sometimes the investor will change the ownership structure of an existing building. In this case, each tenant purchases a unit plus a percentage of the common areas and the land from the present property owner or the investor, who acts as an intermediary. Most often, however, condominium projects are multifamily communities built by speculative developers for sale to individual buyers. The master deed. Most state laws enable and regulate the formation and control of condominiums. High Master Deed sets up a homeowners association HOA, which follows appropriate state law and defines the property, common elements, easement, and type of ownership. This owners association operates in the same way as a cooperative board of directors. The rights, privileges, and limitations of the association directors are controlled by the bylaws set forth in the Master Deed. The board assesses fees for common areas, maintenance, and association operation costs. It typically authorizes the association to designate the insurance liability of the association and of the individual owners, prorate the common property tax bill among the units, regulate property use, establish a reserve fund for repairs and improvements, and maintain the common elements as described in the governing documents. The association is usually empowered to employ outside professional management. The master deed often provides for the sale, lease, or transfer of rights in the property. It is not uncommon to require that prospective tenants be qualified by the management company. Moreover, some prospective purchasers may have difficulty obtaining a mortgage if a high percentage of the building is tenant occupied. In many states, condominium statutes, although similar to cooperative laws, are less demanding. Because each owner holds fee simple title to a unit, failure by one unit owner to pay a mortgage does not endanger the financing of the entire project, as it might with a cooperative project. It is for this reason that condominium ownership has become so popular. The association may regulate the resale of individual units. Resales are often subject to the right of first refusal by the other owners, minimum credit and reference criteria for the purchaser, or approval by the owners' association. The regulation of resale of condominiums must not be used as a facade for discrimination. For this reason, the restriction of resale rights to condominiums has been severely curtailed by the courts. The property manager's role. The rapid expansion of the residential condominium market has opened new opportunities for property managers. Condominium management, like cooperative management, is concerned mainly with maintaining the integrity of the premises, ensuring ongoing service to occupants, and attaining other mutual goals of the owners. Before taking over an association, the manager should thoroughly read the master deed, carefully study recent operating reports, and review the amounts in any reserve funds. The manager must be familiar with the master deed and bylaws. The manager is usually responsible for billing and collecting assessments and keeping accounting records. Generally, the manager maintains all common areas and advises the owners' association. The property manager usually provides the cost data necessary to draw up an operating budget and make individual assessments for maintenance and reserves, constantly balancing the owner's desires for lower maintenance fees against the need to spend money to preserve the property. A reserve fund is typically required by some financiers, but definitely should be established to save for major repairs, keeping in mind that some very large expenses will be accrued when the property must be repainted and the parking lot repaved. Management contract. The manager should insist on a written contract describing the rights and duties of each party. Areas that should be covered in detail are collection of assessments, accounting and budgeting, maintenance standards, personnel employment, legal status of the manager as an agent, emergency spending, and handling of owner's money. The management contract should also specify the amount of compensation and other terms of the agreement, e.g., hours cancellation. The manager should negotiate a contract for a guaranteed and reasonably long period, knowing that the owners' association governing board will change frequency. The management pricing worksheet is an excellent place to define the time and expense that goes into condominium management. Without such a guideline, the manager may never receive adequate compensation for the time and effort expended in managing the property. Note, however, that the initial agreement for a new condominium is drawn up between the developer, acting on behalf of the owners, and the property manager. Not until the board of directors is elected does control pass from the developer into the hands of an owner's organization. To prevent a developer from retaining control over the property when the owners' association should be functioning independently, many states have enacted legislation imposing a maximum allowable term for management contracts negotiated by developers. Fannie Mae requirements. On the national level, the secondary mortgage markets impose requirements when underwriting purchase loans. Fannie Mae regulations require that developers turn over a condominium association to the owners as soon as a specific percentage of units have been sold and that reserve funds for major repairs be established. Some lenders will not make loans to prospective purchasers if too many of the units are tenant occupied. Required information at time of transfer. At the time that management responsibility is transferred to the manager, they will require the general types of information and records discussed in Unit 5. Condominium managers need, in addition, copies of the covenants, conditions, and restrictions for the building's use, other controlling documents, and any warranties held by the developer and still in force. Insurance. The owners' association usually purchases insurance to cover all the common elements. The individual unit owner must purchase a condominium policy to cover the owner's personal property and any additions or alterations made to the unit. This policy is often referred to as HO 6. The property manager should continually emphasize to the individual owners and the association the importance of carrying adequate insurance. Insurance claims can get complicated. For example, a washing machine hose may disconnect and flood a top floor unit while the owner is on vacation. The occupants of the unit below, which also flooded, happen to be out of town on business. As a result, the leaking water is not noticed for several days, at which time it is discovered that 6 units have water damage, several quite extensively. This scenario is not uncommon, unfortunately. The insurance companies of each unit and that of the association are involved in sorting out the liability. Managing Planned Unit Developments PUDs. The Planned Unit Development PUD is a highly popular concept in land development that is designed to produce a high density of building improvements and maximum utilization of open spaces. These neighborhoods often mix residential with common recreational areas. Owners not only own their own houses, but they have an interest in the Community Homeowners Association that manages the common areas. The common areas can be quite minimal or quite extensive, including parkland, pools, golf courses, clubhouse facilities, and jogging and biking paths. Covenants, conditions, and restrictions CC&Rs. Usually the developer creates the covenants, conditions, and restrictions CC&Rs to enhance the overall quality and desirability of the neighborhood and to keep up the value. Once the developer has sold out, she will turn over enforcement of the CC&Rs to the community association. The homeowners are bound by the ECC&Rs. Some restrictions might include certain house colors, where to park a boat or recreational vehicle, prohibiting certain types of fences, number and kind of pets permitted, and so on. Property manager's role. In practice, the management of a PUD is very similar to that of a condominium. The manager is expected to see that the common property is maintained while, at the same time, keeping fees as low as possible. Managing subsidized housing. Learning objective. Summarize the issues involved when managing subsidized housing. Actual construction and operation of public housing projects for low-income families has traditionally been the responsibility of local governments. In 1965, Congress authorized the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development HUD to provide financial assistance to local housing authorities for the acquisition and operation of existing buildings or privately constructed new housing for low-income tenants. Under the 1968 Housing and Urban Development Act, the Federal Housing Administration FHA, an agency of HUD, was authorized to encourage private participation in the development and construction of housing for low-income families through rental and mortgage insurance programs. FHA insured mortgages and government subsidies were awarded to nonprofit cooperative groups for the construction of low-income housing. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, housing funds were made available to private owners to build and manage affordable housing for the low, very low, and extremely low income population. These units are available throughout the country. Although owned and managed by private owners and agents, the units must adhere to strict HUD enforcement regarding verification of resident income and meet very high standards of physical condition. Today, HUD is pushing for the privatization and project-based management of public housing. As there are 3,400 public housing authorities in the United States responsible for more than 1.3 million units, cooperating with HUD is a great opportunity for many property managers. These complex networks are in sharp contrast to private management, which often gives employees authority to make many decisions on site. Each government program comes with its own set of rules and criteria. This discussion will highlight certain elements common to each program, but the property manager truly becomes a specialist when managing subsidized housing. Section 8 Housing Assistance Programs. Single-family homes or apartments in public housing buildings covered under the HUD Section 8 Housing Assistance Payments Program are rented on a subsidized basis. A low or very low income family will pay up to 30% of its adjusted monthly income. HUD pays the landlord the difference between that and market rent. Income eligibility for occupants of public housing varies according to geographic area and the number of dependents in the family. In 1996, HUD established the Real Estate Assessment Center REAC in order to assess the stock of private HUD housing in the United States. This set of stringent physical standards requires owners and agents to maintain HUD housing to the highest standards of safe, decent, and sanitary housing. REAC has been instrumental in changing HUD housing for the better. Tenant Rental Assistance Certification System TRACS. HUD developed a computer system to improve the management of all assisted housing programs. The Tenant Rental Assistance Certification System TRACS gives HUD a central information system used to verify subsidy calculations. TRACS has automated the collection of tenant data and provides HUD offices with an online database, significantly reducing HUD's paperwork. TRACS is already reducing fraud, speeding up the turnaround of information processing, and improving the management of and budgeting for subsidy programs. Need for professional property management. All subsidized public housing developments, of whatever type, have a common need for ongoing, competent management. Since its inception, low-income public housing has suffered from both inadequate property management and bureaucratic mismanagement. Effective January 31st, 2010, all public and private affordable housing owners must use HUD's Enterprise Income Verification EIV system. EIV provides data from TRACS and both the Social Security Administration and the Health and Human Services New Hire database to ensure that residents are making a full and adequate disclosure of household income to landlords to reduce waste and fraud of HUD funding. This will allow more households to take advantage of available federal programs. In an effort to stay solvent, properties are funded with many types of federal funding, each of which have specific rules and regulations and require great attention to detail to stay in compliance. Thus, the need for trained, affordable professionals is greater than ever. Professional property managers who choose affordable housing as a career have a number of options for specific training and certification through local HUD offices and state finance agencies. Some of the available certifications follow. Consistency with tenants. A consistent tenant selection plan (TSP) for initial tenant screening helps to avoid later undesirable conduct. At a minimum, the TSP should include credit and criminal checks. Landlord references may uncover a history of property damage, noise complaints, or other problems. The manager should not tolerate nor cater to anyone abusing the system. All residents should receive a copy of the building regulations, clearly establishing the expectations and obligations of both parties. The manager must firmly and reliably enforce those regulations, particularly those concerning pets, maximum number of residents per apartment, security precautions, trash handling, noise, and prompt rental payments. Responsiveness. Residents want to live in a building that is efficiently operated and maintained, and they can often devise a better way of coping with a particular problem, such as building security. An open dialogue shows the tenants that management is doing its best to keep the property safe and clean, encouraging their cooperation in these efforts. Repairs should be made quickly, as good repair service shows that management is sincere about maintaining the building. The system for rent collection should be inflexible. If the rent is not paid within the specified period, appropriate legal action should be taken. This may sound harsh, but there are compelling reasons for management to insist on prompt rental payments. If rent delinquencies are tolerated, payments on the mortgage and other expenses for the property will be delayed and late penalties incurred. Lax collection procedures are actually a disservice to delinquent tenants, because those tenants are thus allowed to build up a larger debt than they can afford to repay. The manager also is being unfair to residents who pay their rent promptly, for rental rates will eventually have to be raised to cover the delinquencies. Occupant responsibility. Occupant responsibility tenants should be educated about management procedures and policies and about their own responsibility in the maintenance of the building. Many of them will have to be shown how to care for the equipment in their apartments and how to report maintenance problems. They should be encouraged to take pride in their homes and to report disruptive or destructive behavior. As tenants become more responsible, they become less prone to vandalism. Drug abuse and other crime. Managers of many subsidized rental properties must cope with drug dealing and high crime rates. To help meet this challenge, Congress passed the Drug-Free Workplace Act of 1988 as part of omnibus drug legislation. Based on the provisions in the Act, public housing authorities (FAS) receiving grants, operating subsidies, or annual contributions are required to submit a drug-free workplace certification, along with an authority's operating budget. All FAS must also submit a certification with applications for funds. Companies that contract with a FEA for goods or services in amounts of $25,000 or more must certify to the FHHAD that they will maintain a drug-free workplace. These contractors or consultants must publish a statement on employee use of controlled substances in the workplace. They must establish a drug-free awareness program to inform employees of the dangers of drug abuse and of company policy with regard to drug use, the availability of drug counseling or other employee assistance programs, and the penalties that may be imposed for drug abuse violations. Contractors also must notify federal agencies of employees convicted of criminal drug statutes, and they must notify federal agencies that they are requiring satisfactory participation by convicted employees in drug abuse assistance programs. Finally, they must provide a good faith effort to maintain a drug-free workplace, manufactured and senior housing. Learning objective. Summarize the issues involved when managing manufactured home parks and housing for the elderly. Managing manufactured home parks. Manufactured homes, formerly referred to as mobile homes, have changed a lot over the years. They are no longer trailer houses being pulled down the road or rusting exteriors next door to an automotive dump. However, these images have been hard to overcome. Today's manufactured homes are efficient, practical, and affordable housing for 8% of Americans. Some are even luxurious. Today, the manufactured home park is a combination of individual home ownership and home site rental. It is usually an orderly, well-groomed entity and sometimes is indistinguishable from a more traditional development. Once the manufactured home has been moved to the site, most are never moved again, as their value comes from the desirability of the community. Near elderly housing. Under the Fair Housing Laws, certain housing is exempt from the law requiring access to housing by families with children. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development HUD defines near elderly as 55 and older and elderly as 62 and older. Once a community qualifies for this designation from HUD, it can refuse to rent to anyone with children, and many manufactured home parks do just that. In fact, some even market themselves as housing for the elderly. Marketing to these folks is financially sound. Near elderly ages 55 to 64 have the highest per capita income, and seniors age 65 and over have the most discretionary income. In any event, the manager generally is charged with minimally maintaining the value of the park, and often with increasing the value by improving condition and appearance. Every attractive, well-maintained property will attract sound tenants and sell for a higher price when put on the market, even when compared with a poorly maintained park bringing in the same amount of income. The manager may be directed to track other sources of income from laundromats, vending machines, convenience stores, and the like. Computer software can help greatly. Anyone specializing in mobile park management should consult Managing Mobile Home Parks, a book published by the Institute of Real Estate Management, IRM. Managing housing for the elderly. Americans are living longer. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the population in the 55 to 64 age group will grow by 75% until the year 2020. Many will continue to live in their homes. Others will move into communities specifically designed with the older person in mind. As previously noted, many of the aging population have spendable income, and many of these are moving into manufactured home parks or upscale condo, co-op, or apartment communities. Active adult communities. Those in the 55 to 65 age group typically sell a larger home and move into an active, resort-oriented community offering single-family attached housing. Residents are looking for a lifestyle, meaning that they want recreational amenities, security, and social functions. They will probably live there for 10 to 15 years. Many of these homes are condominium owned, so there is a definite need for professional management, not only of the housing, but also of all of the associated amenities. Independent living developments. The healthy 70 to 75 age group is willing to move down in size, quality, and range of recreational amenities. Recreational facilities such as gyms, pools, and garden areas are more important than golf courses and more active recreation. Many will purchase in condominium communities with ownership of zero lot lines, courtyard homes, or attached townhouse units, all of which require professional management. Still others will seek out rentals in a multifamily facility with an on-site concierge or staff. Congregate care communities. Elders live on their own with a minimum of assistance, but shelter, social health care, and support services are provided in this contractual arrangement. Often, although residents may cook in their own units, they share common dining and social areas. Congregate care primarily serves those 75 to 80 years of age, usually single women and a few couples. Indoor social activities are far more desirable than outdoor recreational facilities, especially in colder climates. Congregate care management may offer services similar to those offered in hotels. Many of these communities are developed as cooperatives, retaining the right to purchase back the apartment and developing waiting lists. Assisted living facilities. Although not generally licensed as a nursing home, these facilities offer more personal care to the resident who needs assistance with daily activities, such as help with dressing, hygiene, and medications as needed, but does not require around-the-clock assistance. Usually these facilities can more easily respond to acute medical emergencies and provide related medical services. The market consists primarily of women in their mid-80s. Most of these facilities are designed for single and not double occupancy. Nursing homes. Around-the-clock nursing home care is more similar to a hospital model than to typical rental situations, and therefore is more likely to be developed by nursing care specialists. Living arrangements for people with differing needs. Today, the aging baby boomers realize that they will no doubt live longer than their parents, and it is likely that they eventually will need some kind of assisted care. Some communities are planned and developed so that people can move in while they are still healthy and mobile and enjoy an active lifestyle, with the idea that as they need more care, they can receive it at the community. Although this is the age group that will eventually need more care, they are not eager to be mixed with those requiring that care. From a psychological and marketing viewpoint, it is easiest to mix congregate care housing with assisted living arrangements than independent living and congregate care. Property management skills. Managers of these facilities are called upon to facilitate social events, manage medical emergencies, provide most housekeeping, provide meals, and manage the traditional operating reports to owners. Marketing skills are needed here more than ever. As more communities are being built, there is increasing competition for these tenants. It goes without saying that such managers must have a real affinity for and care for the aging population. Case study: the residential manager. Harriet Montgomery is the property manager of a large apartment complex. One of the tenants, Han, came to Montgomery's office with a complaint. Han told Montgomery that his bathtub did not drain properly, but Han's repeated requests to the resident manager, Fitzgerald, to have it repaired have been ignored. Han claimed that several of his friends, who were also tenants, had given Fitzgerald repair requests, and they had all been completed immediately. Han suspects that Fitzgerald is dragging his heels about Han's request because Han is Asian American and Fitzgerald is discriminating against him. Thank you. We're almost done with the unit. And this last part is kind of like the spicy, juicy part. Especially in our industry, there is a huge, huge, huge focus of making sure we have a level playing field, that there's no even thought of discrimination. So, how should Montgomery respond to Han's complaint? Is this a discrimination complaint? Well, it could be, especially if other people are getting, the work done in their units and Han is not getting the work done in his units after several attempts. So a good like rule of thumb is just to make sure get these repairs done right away. As soon as they come in, you have a good process of tracking that and you make sure that the repairs are done. What procedures can Montgomery implement to ward off complaints like this in the future? Well, when you're doing that transaction, we want to make sure that there is documentation of when the request for repair came in, and then there's procedure following that, right? Like, so what does the property manager need to do after that documentation comes in? What should Montgomery do about Fitzgerald? Well, do the work, right? That's the most important thing. If there is repairs needed or requested, make sure that those get done. And if those repairs are not going to get done, make sure that you let the tenant know right away.